Fresh out of the oven, these sourdough dinner rolls are so delicious. Now let's make them. All right, it's time to make dinner rolls. Dinner rolls, baby. Start off with 250 grams of milk. I'm using whole milk. Add 10 grams of salt. Next, add 30 grams of sugar. Ooh, 37, 38. Well, it's going to be a little sweeter, isn't it? Next, we need some melted butter. I'm using homemade butter, but feel free to use whatever butter you'd like or butter replacement. We need 60 grams of melted butter. Between 58 and 60 grams is fine. You could also just use cold butter and shred it if you don't want to melt it. Hey, look at that. How much did I lose? Wow. You might want to melt a little more than you need just so you don't have to remelt more if you lost some in the heating process. I'm just adding a few pieces extra and I'm just going to mix it in cold. Whatever. Next, add 100 grams of active or recently active starter. My starter is pretty active. After I fed it and it doubled in size, I did put it in the fridge, so it's cold now. It might have shrank just a little bit, but it's still fine. Oh, that's a lot. It's still a lot. Come back. Come back. Come back. Come back. If you accidentally add too much, try to fish it out like I do. Stir, baby, stir. Stir, baby, stir. Give the ingredients a good mix. Now add 450 grams of all-purpose flour. 450 of flour, but because I put more sourdough starter, I'm going to do like 425. And I don't know about you, but I am always making mistakes. So sometimes I have to tweak the recipe a bit because of my mistakes. Don't be afraid to adjust things a little if you need to. Keep in mind for things like salt, you always want 2 to 2.5% of the total amount of flour, sourdough starter, or anything else that's similar to flour. Now start mixing all of that together to incorporate all the ingredients. Then once the ingredients are pretty incorporated, you'll start kneading the dough. After kneading for a bit in the bowl, then you can flour your surface and knead it directly on the surface. Knead for about 5 minutes or so. You'll see that the dough is a much more smoother consistency. And then you just want to create a seam. So roll it into a ball and do the little candy cane scoot that's in the shape of a candy cane to make a seam and let it rest. After that, just place it in a bowl and let it double in size, basically. The time it will take to double will vary depending on how warm or cold your house is. For reference, I made this around 4 p.m. on day 1, and I let it sit out all the way until about 10 a.m. the next day. So that was about 18 hours. The house is pretty cold right now, but if it was the summertime, I probably would have only needed about 4 hours. Now take it out of the bowl, and then we will divide it up into our dinner rolls. But just know that if you aren't sure how much time you'll need to let it rise, then just start early and then let it sit out. Check on it every now and then. And then if it's rising too quickly and you don't have time to continue the recipe, then stick it in the fridge and deal with it later. Or if you're trying to rush things, then you can always turn your oven on, heat it up, turn it off, then stick the dough in there, just cover it. And the oven being so warm will help it to rise. But just be sure it's not too warm where you're cooking the dough. Once you make this recipe the first time, then you'll have a better idea of how much time you need. I know in the beginning it took me a long time to try to make a recipe just because I was nervous about figuring out the timing. Don't worry about it, just do it. And then after you make it once, you'll get a better idea of how to fit it into your schedule. Now divide the dough into either 8 to 10 pieces. I started dividing it and then I decided that I wanted it to be 10 smaller rolls. Once you divide them, you're going to roll them into a ball. But before you roll them into a ball, you're going to fold the outsides in so you create a little tension in the dough and then roll the bottom to create a seam. Again, to repeat, you're just going to pull the sides down to the bottom like as if you're covering it in a blanket and then pinch the bottom together and then roll it. Next, grease a pan. I just use butter, and then place the dough balls in the pan. We're gonna let it rise till they just about double. Be sure to cover them and let them sit out for a few hours. If it's cold, you're gonna let them sit out for longer. If it's warm, you're gonna not have to let them sit out so long. Just check on them every once in a while. So I left these out pretty much all day, and now I'm going to do an egg wash. So get an egg, mix it up, and then just brush the egg on top of all of the dinner rolls. This is going to make them nice and golden brown. Now we're going to bake these at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for about 25 to 30 minutes. And this is what they'll look like when they're done. Fresh out of the oven. These dinner rolls are so yummy. They're fluffy and they're moist and they are delicious. You definitely need to give this recipe a try. Thanks for watching. Is this on? Because the light's not turning on. And I think the oven just turned off. Oh gosh. Let's try this thing. If this will fit. Oh boy. Duke. Oh, they're loving.